it's been a little while since I've done a scrapbooking process video. I have been away from scrapbooking for I guess a week or two since I got back from Crop and Create. I've been just getting caught up with some administrative stuff and tidying up my room and getting ready for the next little while. So today I created this page, which is one of my favorite pages in quite a long time. I really, really love it. It is about my friendship with the amazing Stephanie Hart, and I used the, which kit was it? I used the March hip kit. I did a little bit of mixed media on the background. You can barely see it there, but I did do some. And I also did some watercoloring over this title. So check out the process video that's coming up if you want to see more about how I made this layout. So I'm starting here just by familiarizing myself with what comes in the March hip kit, because it's been a while since I've had a look at it, so I just want to remember the theming and the color schemes and that sort of thing, and some of the specific embellishments that are in here. And so I'm just having a quick browse through the embellishments, the sticker sheets, and taking a mental note of anything that I think might work well with the story that I want to tell with these two photos. Meanwhile, those two photos were printing off on my Epson PictureMate charm. I'll trim them down in a few minutes, but I'm going to start by having a look through the paper. I pulled out these two pieces of cardstock as potential backgrounds, but then I saw this ledger paper from Crate Paper from the Maggie Holmes collection, and it was perfect, so I put aside those two cardstock pieces, and I'll save them for another time. Now this is a piece of Chamel paper from the Little by Little collection, and I'm cutting out the word friendship because I'm thinking it might make a really great portion of a title. And I noticed that the flip side of that paper, like the B side, was really, really pretty, and I thought would work really well with the colors. I'm basically looking for colors that will pick up on some of the colors in those background, in the backdrop of the photo. So those are actually pinwheels from my mind's eye that were on display for you to take your picture in front of. So I'm going to be choosing my colors based on the colors in those circles in the background. Now I'm just using my Creative Memories trimmer to trim up these photos. They're printed at 3x3, and I'm trimming them with a very narrow white border. And you'll notice that Stephanie's chin is cut off on one of them, and so I am going to be lining them up one on top of another, just to kind of take away from the fact that one of them is cropped incorrectly, with Stephanie's chin a little bit missing, and our heads are just a little bit too far down on that. You'll also notice that there's a large part of the curtain showing in the top part of that, and it's very dark and kind of takes away from the photo. So I'm going to design my page so that some embellishments can cover up that. So here's that piece of background ledger paper from the Chasing Dreams collection from Maggie Holmes. I just cut some strips off of it so that it could be 11.5 by 11.5 instead of 12 by 12. And then this is a piece of Dear Lizzie paper from the Lovely Day collection. I am just cutting a chunk out of the center of it because even though I have two pages of this, I really love this paper, and so I don't want to waste any of it. So I just cut the chunk out of the center so that I could use that either on this project or on some other project. I did get the extra paper add-on for this kit, which means that I have two of each of these papers, which is very nice and convenient. So I'm actually using the ledger paper design, so see how I'm kind of measuring up and making note of where I'm going to want this stencil to go. So this stencil is from from Carta Bella, and it came in the color add-on for the March kit. And again, that's the Hip Kit Club that all of these supplies are from. I don't think I'm using anything at all for my stash. It's all Kit Club stuff. So have a look at this. Oh my goodness. These are called Paste Ease, and this color is called Raspberry Sherbet, and these are Shimmer's products. And holy moly, this is such a lovely product to work with. Look at how thick it is, and look at how beautiful and glossy it is. I shouldn't even say glossy. It's nice and glossy when it's in in the little tub, but it dries to a really nice flat texture. It's really quite nice. So I just smeared some pink on, as you see there, and I'm going to show you the other color that comes in the kit. It's called Hold the Mustard, and it really looks like mustard in the in the tub especially, but once it dries just slightly brighter than that. So not quite so mustardy. I'm taking the tiniest little bit, see that? And I'm going to smear it on the top here. I'm just holding my stencil in place so that it doesn't move around at all. And I'm trying to not mix the two too much. So I do want a little bit of that yellow to go down into the pink that I already put on, and that will give me a lovely orangey reddy color. But I'm trying to keep the two colors pretty separate, except for where they overlap just a tiny little bit. And I'm just using my palette knife to do that. And then I just took off the mask, and now I'm going to clean the mask before I reapply it. I am going to line it up and reapply more because I don't want just a square of this pattern. I want more than that. I want it to extend most of the length of the page. So I'm just using my baby wipe to clean it up, and now I'm going to dry this paste. And you know, the funny thing is that I'm drying and drying and drying, and it doesn't even occur to me to check and see if it's dried. And when I do check it, it's definitely really, really dry. So I suspect, because I'm used to things taking a long time to dry, but I suspect that these Shimmers products are probably designed to dry pretty quickly because it was definitely very well dried by the time I tested it. So the next time I use it, I'm going to play around a little bit with figuring out just how much you need to dry it. So you see me there, I just lined up the pattern so that I can just carry the pattern down and just keep on repeating it. And I'm picking up on the yellow that I had already started to apply there. And now I'm going to switch over to the pink, and like I did before, I'm going to just make those overlap a tiny little bit. And I'm using less product here because it's getting a little bit blended, and I don't want I want the bottom part to be really pink, and I only want the parts where they really overlap to have more of that orangey look to it. I am going to, and just using a baby wipe to remove some of the bits of extra paste that were on my sheet. And because it's still wet, I can do that really, really carefully though, because it's only pattern paper and it can't take too much baby wiping or it starts to kind of fall apart. So I thought about putting my pastes away, and then I realized, no, I think I'll put a little bit more of a pattern over here, and that will just give me a little bit more balance. It felt like the page was going to be kind of lopsided with just the pattern over there on the right hand side. So repeating that pattern just in a small way over here, in a small amount over here on the left side, just helps to provide a little bit more balance to this page. And at this point, I'm not sure how I'm going to be designing this page, like what kind of a shape it's going to have, other than I know that the photos will be stacked and over on the right, and I know that the word friendship will run across most of the length of this page. I used some washi tape to keep my stencil in place the last 2 times that I used it. And that just keeps it from shifting and frees me up to be able to use my right hand other than just holding the stencil down, or my left hand, that is. So again, just using a baby wipe to clean up that stencil while it's still wet, and that keeps me from having to really soak it and scrape at it. And the craft mat that I'm using is a Heidi Swap non-stick heat-proof mat. It's like the Tim Holtz one, it's just white instead of brown. Now here I am using the baby wipe, and I went too heavy-handed and I did mess up the pattern paper, so do be careful doing that, but I'm going to cover that up with some embellishments, so never fear. So here's that word friendship, and look at how nicely the word friendship just connects those two pieces of stenciling to one another. It just spans that gap between the two amounts of stenciling, and I think it really ties the page together really nicely. It's a little bit of an accident there. I didn't really have that in mind when I designed it, but it's one of those things. I usually design around my mixed media. I don't really usually make my mixed media try to take on a certain shape or anything. I just go with it and then I'll just design around it. So now I'm just cutting two strips of pattern paper. So that green one is the hexagon-ish type of pattern paper that's on the B side of the word paper from Shawne that the friendship is cut out of. And then the pink is, I can't remember what the pink is from because this is the second time I'm narrating and I don't have any of my list in front of me because this whole file was corrupt. So it could be Dear Lizzie or it could be crepe paper. So my apologies for not knowing what that pink paper is. Now this is Dear Lizzie. This floral pattern. Oh, I love it so much. Now I chose two patterns that read as a solid, so they're not multicolored patterns. Those two solid-ish patterns, the green one by Shawne and then the pink one that's probably by Dear Lizzie, those two kind of serve as a not too busy mat for my photos. And I didn't want, because the photos themselves have lots of busy patterns on them and multicolors, I didn't want the photos to be right against a multicolored pattern paper. So I put the green one and the pink one on there, and then I can put the multicolored pattern paper behind those so that it's not right against the photos. And you'll notice that I hung on to those little scraps that I cut off the bottom of those strips, and that's because I'm not sure if I'm going to want to piece them back together on the other side, like have some strips of paper hang out underneath of the friendship title or not. So I'm going to hang on to them and you'll see whether I use them later or not. So I just pulled out my mist sample swatch tags. And from the swatches, it looked like Seafoam was going to be the color that I wanted the most. This is a Mr. Huey's mist, and I'm not really liking it all that much. But it's already on the page, so I'm just going to add some white and see if I can change my mind, see if I like it a little bit more after I add some white. And, it's okay. Now I'm actually going to go to my stash and grab some Sweet Mint Heidi Swap Color Shine. And this is a much lighter and brighter color of mist. And this is more the color that I wish I had used from the beginning, but better late than never. So I'm just going to add it in there. And the reason I'm adding some mist at this point is because my mixed media background was looking just a little bit too structured and organized and orderly, I guess, and I just wanted it to have more of a messy look. So adding some splotches of ink is a really good way to make something look a little bit more casual and thrown together instead of looking so perfectly lined up and contrived. So I am drying those with my heat gun. And I'm noticing that it's actually taking longer to dry the mist splotches than it did to dry the paste, which usually it's the other way around. So that's worth noting. And I just felt like the background needed a little something else. So I added some black. This is this is Heidi Swap Color Shine in black. And so I pulled out my mat again. This is my Tri-Art palette. And I just added some more black splatters. Now, of course, I need to zap it with my heat gun again. And continuing to kind of try to air dry it. It does take a while to dry these this ink, and I really don't want to get any, like, it's really messy if you accidentally place something in wet ink and then you move it around and it leaves a trail, and it's just not very nice. So I wanted to take my time and get that really dried. So now here is this friendship title that I had cut out, and I am going to outline it. I'm using a Pitt pen, an artist Pitt pen by Faber-Castell. The color is warm gray, and it is a brush tip pen, and so it does a much bolder outline than my other pens that I usually use for outlining, and I really like the bold, blocky look that this gives these letters. And as I outline it, I'm trying to go pretty fast, and I'm erring on the side, like I'm trying to run my line on the inside of the pink, because I don't really want my letters to be any bigger than they already are. They're quite blocky already, and so I don't want to fatten them up by drawing the line on the white part. I want to keep them about the same shape by drawing my line on the pink part. I mean the same size. Of course, they ought to be the same shape if I'm doing a reasonable job of outlining. Now I've just pulled out my watercolor palette. This is a palette that Irit sent me, and I am so in love with it. I asked her to send me to gather up some colors of watercolors that she thought I would like and that I thought I would like, and we had a really fun time picking out colors for me, and I have been really enjoying using this watercolor palette. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding a little bit of watercolor to the background of this title, because it just wasn't looking handmade enough. It kind of looked like I cut it out of a piece of paper, which I did, but I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look a little bit more homemade. So now I need to be careful here, because this is pattern paper, not watercolor paper, and so it's not going to handle a whole lot of water. So I'm trying to find a balance between using enough water that it looks really nice and not using too much water that the paper starts to fall apart and disintegrate. And I managed to do it. I even pushed my luck with 2 layers there, if you noticed. I really like to add a second layer to deepen the color, because it adds all kinds of beautiful variation to the background. Instead of getting at the darkness that I wanted it the first time, I much rather layering and overlapping my watercolors to get that really nice watercolory look. Now, the actual pink part was looking a little bit too plain and like it was printed up and not like it was watercolored. So I added some pink watercolor, and it actually, the first color I used was making it look a little bit too purpley or browny. And so I added opera pink because it just brightened it up a little bit as well. So there we go. That is looking a lot more like a homemade title. And I quite like it. It's so nice. I love how it turned out. So I did zap it with my heat gun, although I cut that part out. And now it's nice and dry, and I'm going to head over to my sewing machine. So it just felt like it needed a little something else to, again, add to that handmade look of my title. And although this is going to end up taking a lot of time, for some reason it didn't record this part, but I outlined the whole thing with white thread, and then I changed my thread to that really bright neon pink. Now it doesn't look neon because once it's on the paper, it just doesn't look neon anymore. But it is a very nice, vivid pink. And I am just following the channels of the letters and basically adding pink stitching to the shape of the letters. And I'm just taking my time. You can't tell because it is on fast forward, but this is 4 times the speed that I was actually doing it. So I really did take my time. And sometimes you have to lift up your foot, like the little presser foot, and turn the letter around. And I'm also kind of going back and forth a little bit to get to make it look a little bit casual and overlapped and just a little bit messy looking. And what I find this does is it just adds to the handmade look of this title. And I really wanted this title to be special. I added the watercolor to it because Stephanie is the person who really pushed me to start using, it didn't push me, but really encouraged me to start using watercolors. And she used to bring her watercolors over, well, she still does, over to my scrap room on Friday nights, and we'd hang out and she'd be watercoloring and I'd be scrapbooking, and I'd always take some time and play with some of her watercolors, and she really encouraged me to start trying watercolors myself. And so adding the watercolor part of this really, I think, is really relevant to the story and to my, my thought of our friendship. It includes craftiness and painting and that sort of thing. Stephanie is the creative cat lady, and she does lots of beautiful watercolors and also mixed media projects. She makes lots of cats and critters and girls and backgrounds, and she is always doing new things with paint and mixed media supplies. So that was a bit of the inspiration for making this title so detailed and elaborate. And so you see that it does take a bit of time to do this, but I really love the effect, and I think it's worth it. I really like my scrapbook pages to have lots of detail like this. I think it really makes my pages a joy for me to look at when I go back and I can remember, trying out new things like sewing over a title and that sort of thing. And it kind of adds to my own enjoyment when I look back at the album, and it's also just really fun to do it in the moment as well. Like I enjoy the process as well. So I trimmed the threads off of that title so that they were kind of messy, meaning I didn't trim them down as tight as I could have to the piece of paper, and that just adds further to the messy handmade look of this. Now I'm taking some foam dots, because some foam tape and some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals that I'm going to use to pop up the word friendship off of my title. And now here I am, I'm just going to piece back together these little bits because I'm deciding I actually do want these little pieces of paper to extend down below my title. And so I'm piecing them back together, but I'm piecing them together a little bit differently than they would have fallen if I had left the whole thing intact. And that's just something to remember when you're, spanning your paper across something. You can always chop it up and then change the way that it lands so that it looks nice at the bottom. Like, for example, I wanted to see a little bit of each of the pieces of paper, and I also wanted to see the mixed media peeking out from behind. So if I had just left them the way they naturally fell before I cut off the bottoms of those pieces of paper, I wouldn't have had all of those things happening at the same time. So these are Dear Lizzie letter stickers that came in the kit. They're called Bonjour, and they are amazing. As the word says, I'm spelling out the word amazing with a really amazing font. These fonts are so beautiful. They have rose gold accents and wonky, strange stripes all over them in beautiful colors, and each one is different, and so it gives a real whimsical look to your title. And I thought that these letter stickers would really balance off with that nice blocky word friendship at the bottom. And I gave those letter stickers a bouncing baseline, which gives them an even more casual and relaxed kind of a look. So instead of them all being lined up on the top or the bottom, I kind of have them going up and down. And now as I place these onto the background paper, I'm actually putting them a little bit too low by accident. And it's just kind of crowding the word friendship a little bit. And also I have quite a bit of space to use there. I'm planning to fill most of the space that the mixed media on the left side takes up. I'm planning to span most of that space with my titles, so I can afford to have these a little bit more spaced out than they were at first. So that's why I'm spacing them out a little bit more. So here we go. Now it's almost finished. And I am going to run those through my sewing machine. I forgot to record it, but here it is completed. It's pretty easy. I just ran it through twice with a straight stitch, and each of the 3 lines of text. And so then I just used my scissors to trim that down, and I love these little flags from the Dear Lizzie Lovely Day collection. They're so adorable, and I thought that they would look perfect beside these photos because they have a similar theme of kind of like celebration, photo booth, flags. They kind of all go together in my mind. And so I'm just grabbing a piece of tracing paper here, and you see that I kind of spaced out my journaling beforehand because I needed my journaling to end so that basically I wanted it to end right where the title started, because the title is basically the end of my journaling. So I'll read you the journaling, and I always use tracing paper when I need journaling to end at a certain spot because it takes the guesswork out of it. So my journaling says, "Who knew back when Stephanie Facebook messaged me out of the blue, introduced herself, and invited me to Crop and Create Moncton back in March of 2013, that it would be," and then the start of an amazing friendship. So that is and now what took me so long here is that I had to go and find the date because I couldn't remember what year it was. And now the journaling that I didn't put here, but I did go back and put it in. You'll see it in the photos, but you won't see it in my process video. Under the word friendship, actually under the word friend, part of friendship, I wrote, "I'm glad neither of us turned out to be axe murderers," because that's kind of our inside joke that, we didn't really know each other, and we had literally never met each other and Facebook messaged each other online. And our very first meetup was a 4-hour road trip to a different province together. So we always joke about how we're glad that we A, got along, but B, that neither of us were, creeps. So anyhow, because my journaling says has the year refers to 2013, I want to make it really, really clear that these are not photos from 2013. These are photos from this year's Crop and Create. So I'm looking for something that I can put a date stamp on, and I really love this roller date stamp that came in last month's hip kit, and it's really not the best roller date stamp to use with this kind of an embellishment because as you're going to see, you can't really get the full effect of the roller date stamp, but that's okay. I really like the font of the date on this roller date stamp, and I like the messy look of just stamping it a whole bunch of times to get the date on there. So, and you end up getting all those flowery things over and over again too on it, which just kind of looks messy and casual. So I overlapped those two and glued them to one another, and I'm going to peek them out of the top right there. And it turns out that in order for them to sit the way I want them to, I am completely covering up the date. So now I have to go and add that same roller date stamp a couple more times just to make sure that the date is actually going to show, since it is actually pretty important that I have the date on this one. Now this says now is the new later, and I really love that as a design element. So the phrase doesn't terribly clash, like it's not all that relevant, but it's not irrelevant either. So I'm going to go with it. I have a hard time using phrases that don't fit with the story I'm trying to tell, but I think that this phrase is generic enough, and it's there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to go with it. And at first, you see how these 3 clusters, one of them is not going to stay where it's at because I'm going to move the one that's beside Stephanie's face and move it over across to the other side where I'm at right now. So because that just allows for better flow. I want these 3 clusters of embellishments to really guide your eye around the page. So rather than them going on 3 different sides of just the photos. If I move the cluster over to the other side of the O in of, where that splatter was that I didn't like all that much, I can use those embellishments to cover some of those splatters that I didn't like, and also draw your eye over to that side of the page. And it includes that way, as your eyes move from one corner to the other of that triangle, it incorporates the whole entire page, from the journaling to the title to the photos. And so now I'm just having another look through the embellishments to see if there's anything else that I might want to put in here. And I'm feeling like I need something behind these flags because they seem like they're getting a little bit lost with all of those layers behind them. So by adding that floral piece behind those flags, what it does is it allows me to anchor the flags there, but also it gives me there's a floral die cut piece in every one of those 3 corners. So we have a floral die cut piece, a rubber chip, and a flare badge in each of the 3 corners. And that kind of repetition really brings a page together, makes it look cohesive and orderly. And then the things that are unique in each of those embellishments become make the page have a little bit more dynamic energy. So I'm using that same gray Pitt pen to outline these flowers, and that just gives them a little bit of definition so that they don't get mixed in with the background too much. Like, I don't want them to get lost. And now those tiny little flowers are just too tiny to outline in such a bold pen, so I just used my gray Chamel pen for that. And I just used a bit of ATG to hold that in place. And then the flags layer quite nicely with it. That little rubber piece can kind of stick out wherever it fits. And I don't want to put, so I'm going to use Tombow Mono Multi adhesive, and which is my glue that I like to stick paper to non-paper. I just used a little bit too much of it, so I had to take some off. And now this flare badge, I don't want to put it right in the center of the flower. I don't want it to look like it is the center of the flower. I want it to look more like it's layered with the flower. So that's why I put it a little bit off center. And now again, I'm outlining these. It doesn't have to be outlined perfectly because so much of these die cut pieces are actually covered by other elements on top of them. So I outlined the large items in the gray Pitt pen, and then the smaller items are just being outlined in the Chamel gray pen. I wish I had a darker gray pen. That's a fine tip, but I just don't. I can't find, every time I'm at the art store, I look for one, but I just can't find one. So at some point I changed. There was a rubber piece that was a camera over here, but when I noticed that there was an iPhone in the die cut pieces, I switched the camera to an iPhone, even though that iPhone is much, much bigger. And then I used the star rubber piece, and I didn't really want 2 cameras up there. That's because I found that the iPhone case was a more relevant embellishment for this layout because we were there taking selfies with our iPhones, so it made good sense to use that embellishment on this page. So now I'm doing the same thing in this 3rd cluster. And I'm just layering the phrase here so that I'm using dimensional adhesive to hold it up. The word now has dimensional adhesive behind it, and then new later has just regular adhesive so that it spans through all of those layers pretty nicely. And now again, I had to move that flare badge because I didn't want it to look like it was the center of the flower. I wanted it to be layered on top of it. And then that cute little rubber chip flower, it's so cute. And then I just felt like I needed a little something else in this cluster, so I added some enamel dots from the kit. And then because I added them there, I'll add them to the other 2 clusters as well. And there we go, just 2 to the other 2 clusters because there wasn't quite as much space there to play with. And yes, so there was a little bit too much glue. It was oozing out on the star that was here on the cell phone. Luckily, the cell phone has foil on it, so it was easy to just pull that off and use a baby wipe to get rid of the extra glue that was oozing out. Now I'm using my ATG to stick this this background piece to my main background. And that gives me a really nice black and white border all the way around the edge. I find that those black and white borders really do a nice job of framing out and containing a layout with mixed media on it in particular. They look good on all layouts, but I especially like it on a mixed media layout because it gives it a little bit more structure. Now I was having a bit of trouble with my pen. I'm using my Pentel Energel pen, and I've been raving about this pen, and now here it is not working on me. So I will keep you up to date on how that goes. I was able to get it working again, and then it got a little spotty again. So I'm not sure if maybe I used it over something that I shouldn't have and it just needs to work itself clean, or what. I'll let you know if I end up changing my mind about how awesome this pen is. I haven't had it for very long, so it shouldn't be running out yet. But I mean, gel pens do run out a little bit quicker than non-gel pens, but it should last me more than 2 months. So now I am going to show you the photos and check these out because there are a whole lot of them. You'll get to see my extra journaling right there. I'm glad neither of us turned out to be axe murderers. I love that adds a little bit of humor to this page, which, you know, has some nice silly photos on it as well. And I really love this color scheme, and I think it picks up on the colors in the photos and the space around the title there. It really allows this layout to breathe and not feel too crowded. Even though there is a whole lot going on this layout, it doesn't feel really crowded because I left that white space. It wasn't planned that way, but I'm glad that it ended up that there was a lot of space in between the main title there, the start of an amazing friendship, so that your eye gets a chance to just kind of rest there a little bit. So thanks so much for watching, and have a really great scrappy week.